in 2007. Michael Moody said to me, I'm going to give you 5 names of people that you need to schedule a lunch with, you need to go meet for coffee, you need to go to their homes, you need to meet these people. And of those 5 members of Central Christian Church, one of them was Martha Dryden. And so I remember meeting Martha and Chris at 3rd Street Stuff for coffee so that I could just get to know them, get to know a little bit more about Central. And Martha has, for me then, been someone I have looked to. She doesn't know it necessarily. It's not that I'm calling her up and saying, what should I do about this or what should I do about that? But I have looked to as a model of a woman who is working full-time, a woman who is mothering full-time. And so it is just a joy for me to get to hear more of her story today, because she does it with such grace. With such grace and apparent calm. I understand there's inner stuff, I'm sure. But, I mean, wow. So I'm excited to hear more about your story, Martha.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I do remember that day very clearly. I hadn't thought about it for a while, so thank you. Okay, well, I'm honored to be asked to speak today among so many wise women of Central. I've attended these luncheons myself and am always in awe of the stories that the women amongst us have shared. At 41 years of age, I have so much more to learn and experience, and yet, as I reflect upon the questions at hand, I had a hard time narrowing it down, what I wanted to say today. When thinking about those that have most influenced my life over the years, I think about the different seasons of my life. When I was a very young child, our next door neighbor, Miss Louise Hausch, who I called Neighbor, that's N-A-B-O-R, because I had yet learned how to spell. She first shared the experience, or my first experience, of unconditional love. I had certainly known that love for my family, but Neighbor showed an interest in me, and I'm sure as an elderly woman who lived alone for many years without many visitors or family, I provided great company to her as well. Neighbor was a dear friend. I delivered her newspaper or groceries that my mother, sitting here at the front table, had picked up at the grocery for her. It was my first experience of going to the drive-through liquor store on the Scott-Pitt County line with my mom. She's laughing. I had a very early education on that side because Miss Hausch made the best rum cake. I can almost taste it. And I think she liked a few cocktails in the evening as well. She taught me the joy of watching and learning the different varieties of birds that visited her backyard feeder, and her love of cats, which she allowed in the house, and which my mother was not a big fan of. So I would sneak over and play with her cats. She had beautiful flowers and loved to garden when she was able. She had a money plant, which was my absolute favorite. She would show me how to pull apart the little silver dollar slivers, and they'd go off into the breeze. I'll never forget one morning when I was headed out the door to catch the school bus. Miss Hausch yelled from her door, barely cracked open. I knew something was wrong by the sound of her voice. She had fallen and broken her hip. She laid on the floor all night, unable to reach the phone to call for help. She knew that I would catch the bus that next morning, and so she managed to crawl to the door just in time to call my name. She demonstrated great strength, unconditional love to just a neighbor, although it felt like a stranger, and instilled in me the belief I could do anything. She lived to be 4 days short of her 100th birthday. My grandmother, Fanny Margaret Johnston, was another force of nature who played a big role in my childhood, especially my experience of church. She picked me up every Sunday to go to Sunday school at Newtown Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in Scott County, so that my mom could prepare an elaborate Sunday lunch and my dad could enjoy reading the Sunday newspaper. They join us later for worship, of course. I don't recall a time that Granny missed church, and she always sat in the front, middle, first few pews, there right in front of the minister. Once I had my driver's license, she was a very brave soul and allowed me to pick her up. I have vivid memories of her making peanut butter crackers, simply Ritz crackers and Jif peanut butter, but somehow when she made them, they taste amazing. I could almost hear her drinking from the glass jar that she kept in the refrigerator so that the water would be extra cold on a hot summer day. She was a great cook and the source of many family recipes that we still use today. She loved antiques, dressing up, which include bright red lipstick, or maybe pink sometimes, and of course a pocketbook to match perfectly her outfit. She loved to take us granddaughters shopping, but we were never allowed to wear blue jeans. And yet she was an extremely hard worker. Of course, worked on the farm. She loved to strip tobacco, and she used to keep count as to how many thistles she dug on the farm each day. She grew up during the Depression and saved everything. As she grew older and less mobile, we had the best time playing the card game Rook and watching Shirley Temple movies. She spent her final years in a nursing home, which we visited almost every Sunday. She suffered from dementia, and I'm not sure she knew us those final years. But when we sang old hymns, and my oldest sister Rhonda would play the piano, she joined in and she knew every word by heart. She was 94 when she passed. When I was in middle school, I think probably around 12 years old, I started my first job, the adventures of babysitting. That's when I first met Holly Wiedemann, my employer for the past 17 years. I babysat her son and daughter for about 8 years. When I was in college, I asked her if she'd consider hiring me for a summer internship. I had gone to Georgetown College on a full scholarship from Toyota with the thought that I would be pre-law. However, quickly, I decided that pre-law wasn't the major for me. I switched to a double major in business administration and communication arts, but I still didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Holly agreed to that summer internship, and the summer before my sophomore year, I worked for her at AU Associates Incorporated. She had founded the company to adaptively reuse historic buildings to create affordable housing, using a program that was adopted by Congress in 1986. I was intrigued. She sent me to Irvine, Kentucky that summer to do a market study, literally a door-to-door survey to help prove that there was a need for affordable housing. Because the professional market studies that had been completed said that there wasn't enough demand to support that competitive application with the state. That probably should have been a clue right then and there that this line of work was not going to be an easy one. Some of you know the story of how I met my husband, Chris. It was an 8 a.m. music appreciation class at Georgetown College where I first laid eyes on him. My roommate, Kimberly, and I were seated next to each other when he walked in the door. I leaned over to her and I said, "Ooh, I'd like to date him." And she laughed, but I was serious. I spent the next several weeks trying to find out who he was and how I could find him. I thought his name was Chris, not K-R-I-S, which was the stumper. I searched the entire student directory for every CHRIS in the book to no avail. I asked every upperclassman in my sorority if they knew him. No one did. I think they started to think that he didn't even exist. It turns out he was a new transfer that lived off campus, and his first name was Chris Tin. Later that fall, I spotted him at a fraternity field party, and as he likes to tell the story, he was simply talking to another girl, and suddenly she was gone, and I was standing there as if I had pushed her out of the way. We saw each other in class and around campus, but didn't have our real first date until Valentine's Day in 1998. We dated all the way through college and even spent a year in long-distance relationship while Chris went on to graduate school at Ohio University, and I took on a year commitment with my sorority, Phi Mu, to travel the country. I helped chapters from Louisiana to Nebraska to Texas to South Carolina. I visited over 20 states in that year, traveling to a new college or university each week. Little did I know how much I would find my voice during that time. I came back home and worked for a .com that a previous minister at Newtown had told me about. To make a long story short, that ended in a layoff, which turned into a much bigger opportunity. So rewind to January of 2002, Holly had contacted me to see if I would be interested in joining her full-time. Her part-time assistant was moving out of state, and she was looking to hire her first full-time employee. Chris and I were to be married in April, and we were moving into our first home and thought I really had the best job that was taking off, and so I declined. I just couldn't possibly take on one more change. Ha! So, December happened and I found myself without a job that same year. So I called and asked her for a reference. She said, of course, but I'm going to Glasgow on Monday, so are you up for a road trip? And the rest is history. I started out as her assistant, trying to absorb every particle of knowledge that I could. I helped write grant applications, shadowed her on construction sites, and did my best trying to learn enough architectural details that I could help assist with National Register nominations. I became a project manager and really developed a passion for the work. In 2008, we were opening properties in Glasgow and Lexington, and Chris and I were also preparing to have our first child, Sydney Grace. Then 3 years later, in 2011, we welcomed Clara Ashley to our family. Becoming a mom has been one of the most rewarding and challenging experiences in my life. I'm sure some of you all can tell from my Facebook feed that my two girls are the light of my life, and family time is most treasured, especially our family adventures on vacation. In 2012, Holly made the decision to form her own property management company to manage the company's portfolio. So she tasked me with creating the company, hiring the employees, and essentially building it from the ground up. It was one of the biggest challenges in my professional life, no doubt. I had never managed employees nor performed any of the compliance that's required for this IRS-governed affordable housing program. I took a certification class and surrounded myself with experienced staff so I could learn as much as possible. Today, I manage about 20 people across 2 states with nearly 30 properties in our portfolio. Again, it's challenging and rewarding. As many of you all know, the need for affordable housing is great, and the programs are limited in how it can be properly developed. Holly taught me early on that perseverance is key, especially as a small business owner. She's a visionary where optimism is the only option. I've never been so moved to see a family or a senior citizen break down in tears when they've been given the keys to an apartment that is the nicest place they've lived in their entire life. I've seen so many doors open to someone once they have the stability of a quality place to live. It's not a job anymore. It's certainly become my passion over the past 17 years. The sudden loss of my father on December 29th, 2017 has certainly been the most difficult event I've had to endure. We had just celebrated Christmas Eve at our house, just as we had hosted for the past 9 years since our first daughter, Sydney, was born. That week, he had developed a fever and was very achy. He went to his family doctor and was sent home with a negative flu test. He called back a couple of days later to report that he wasn't feeling better and was told to take ibuprofen, or he could go to the emergency room for treatment. We had planned to take him that morning to get a second opinion in Lexington at urgent treatment. Apparently, he had been suffering from severe anemia, unknown to us. Because this was untreated, the condition resulted in all of his organs shutting down and a heart attack in the early morning hours of Friday, December 29th. We were all in shock and completely devastated. And with the sudden loss, we were now in charge of a 70-acre farm that he still took care of on his own with 20 head of cattle. I can't count the number of offers we had from farmers in our community. Heaven knew we needed it. Dad didn't have 3 boys, but he didn't raise any weak girls either. All 3 of us had been raised on the values of a farmer. Hard work never ends. That was also probably one of the biggest motivators that led all 3 of us to the city. Nevertheless, it was time to figure it out. Rhonda and her husband quickly learned how to use the corn grinder, and Lisa, our fashionable middle sister, ordered a pair of purple Carhartt overalls so that she could help feed the cattle. Less than 2 months after my father passed, my mother fell and broke her hip. We quickly shifted from managing the farm to being there for Mom, as she had always been for us 3. There were so many calls, cards, visits from our friends, family, and especially members of Central. Both David and Elizabeth came to the hospital to pray with us. When the world was clearly moving on, the church remembered where we were and that we were very much in the midst of a difficult time. I will also be forever grateful for the grief class that Pastor Elizabeth led last fall. It was just what I needed and definitely allowed me to grieve and process my feelings among all those that also had experienced great loss. I read a quote the other day that said, "Grief is like glitter. You can throw a handful in the air, but when you try to clean it up, you'll never get it all. Even long after the event, you will still find glitter tucked in the corners. It will always be there somewhere." As I look back over my life, I am profoundly grateful for the relationships I have shared with you, the support of my family who are here today, my parents, my sisters, and my upbringing in the church. There are so many more that have influenced my life, but I don't have time to mention all of them. A few of them include mentors and teachers, such as Mary Henson, my youth Sunday school teacher, Brenda Peterson, who was a minister at Newtown and created our Kindred Spirits spiritual life group, which just celebrated its 20th year. Carolyn Richard, who led Christ Care training, and Bill and Linda Kerwood, who served as my first Sunday school teachers here at Central. The value of these relationships are immeasurable. They've all helped shape me to be me. And in the spirit of our theme of studying the Psalms, I'll close with this. I'm no biblical scholar, but I think I'm most drawn to one of the shorter Psalms. I'm in a point in my life where time is precious. And does anyone else feel like you want to get straight to the point? Psalm 100, entitled A Hymn of Praise. Sing to the Lord, all the world. Worship the Lord with joy. Come before God with happy songs. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. God made us, and we belong to God. We are God's people, and we are God's flock. Enter the temple gates with thanksgiving. Go into its courts with praise. Give thanks to God and praise God. The Lord is good. God's love is eternal, and God's faithfulness lasts forever. Psalm 100 is 5 short verses with a whole lot of meaning for me. A sense of belonging, singing praise, God is good, love is eternal, and God's faithfulness lasts forever. Thank you.
Any questions? Martha will take.
Okay, your double major was what?
Business administration and communications.
But communication is something? I thought you said communication art or something.
Well, it is. I mean, I guess it's
Yeah.
communication
I know
art.
it was. So how did the sorority help you find your voice when you did that extra thing?
Well, so growing up, I was incredibly shy. I usually hid behind my mother. I never wanted to go to school. I did not participate in any extracurriculars. I was somehow in college, which being part of student government also aided in that. And I'm not sure what suddenly I decided to get involved. But I did, which was probably about the same time I joined the sorority. And it just, there's a lot of, I think, negative stereotypes about sororities. My experience is not that. It's empowerment of women, leadership skills, just knowing that there is a peer that believes in you and encourages you was just very empowering to me. And so serving as a consultant for that year, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have connection to any of these women, and yet they were all there showing me support and providing that space where I was up in front of groups of people talking, and which I'm sure my mother still never believes. I mean, she'll see the kindergarten teacher in the grocery, and she said, "How did Martha ever make it to graduate?" I mean, we were afraid she wasn't, because she wouldn't hardly talk. So, yeah.
I can't imagine you being shy.
Most people that know me now don't believe it either, but
That's amazing.
yes.
A few years ago, I think Lexington gave so much money prioritized for the housing. Is there a connection?
Yes.
Can you explain that to us?
Yes, so that, if you're talking about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that is placed with the city of Lexington, yes, the company I work for, we have accessed some of those funds, and they have helped us develop affordable housing in Lexington. I think actually our company may be one of the largest recipients of that, because there's, the way that tax credits are allocated, there's always a gap that is difficult to fill. And those funds work really well in coordination with the tax credits that are given from the state of Kentucky. And they're not given, it's a competitive process, which is very difficult.
How long does it take you to write a typical grant?
We work on them several months, if not years in advance, because you have to go through a very lengthy process of site control, and if there's zoning requirement changes, if it's a historic building, you have to go through that process. It really depends on the property.
And what happened in Irving when you went?
Well,
They need affordable housing?
we built the urban school apartments. It was because those professional market studies did not show the need, but the town really rallied and wrote letters to the state, and we did do the project, and it's the urban school apartments there. We don't own that one any longer. I wish we did, because I'd love to manage it now, given that's where I started. But it is still affordable housing, predominantly for seniors, 55 and older. Yes.
I have one comment. I understand why your children are so young.
Thank you, Linda. Yes.
What are some of your locations in Lexington?
So in Lexington, we have the Parkside Apartments, which is on Cross Keys Road off of Alexandria Drive. Used to be the old YWCA that was abandoned. So we have 3 phases of 36 apartments there. Actually, I was pregnant with Clara. That was my last project as a project manager before I switched over to the management side. Phase 1 was, so I was, yes, you were my project 2 that was happening then. We have First Presbyterian Church Apartments, which is on Market Street, which is one of my most favorite properties because it is a block off Gratz Park, which many of you all know. Our mayor lives there, and there are some of the most beautifully expensive homes. And we have 10 apartments that are affordable housing for people that make 60% and below the area median income. And most people don't know those are there because it's quality housing, and people with different incomes can certainly live on the same street. We have Davis Park View, which is, it was part of the transportation department plan of the extension of Oliver Lewis Way that displaced a lot of dilapidated homes. There are 14 apartments there, a couple single family homes, and then they have a home ownership component to that too, that's separate from our company. We have Arlington Lofts, which the first building just opened in August, and there are 20 units there on North Limestone, right across from Arlington Elementary, and the second building is coming. We have Meadowthorpe Landing, which is under construction right now. It's going to be 71 units for seniors. That's right behind the Meadowthorpe Antique Mall. That'll be opening next March. And then we also have, I think it's called Victory Point Apartments. It's going to open on the Leestown VA campus, which is 50 units of affordable housing for veterans and their families.
So is that building already there and you're just revamping it, or?
It's a combination of, there was an administrative building, there were some former residents of the doctors that worked on that campus along their historic buildings that we're putting back into service, and then there are also some townhomes that are being built in addition to that.
Yes.
Do you have, when I was young, I was working in medical technology, and I worked in country hospital situations, and I had a hard time as a single person finding housing. Do you have any housing for young people?
We do.
Starting out?
Well, it's no age requirement.
Oh, okay.
The only requirement we generally have is for seniors 55 and older, where it limits the age of which you could live there.
And what is some of the criteria? Like, I have no money, so, you know what I mean, but I don't know how much no money they have, you know what I mean?
Right. So it's the program we use, it's governed by the IRS, Section 42, and we basically have to third-party verify all income and assets. So, for example, in Lexington, and these are rough numbers, so don't hold me to it, but for one person in Lexington, 60% and below, I think is around $32,000 annually. So as long as your gross annual income is below $32,000, then you income qualify. We also do a criminal and a credit search. The credit is not restricting those that may have fallen on hard times. It's mostly if they've owed a previous landlord and have not paid that off, or a utility company, because a lot of times you have to have that electric in your name. So basically, if you income qualify, and if there are other restrictions like the age I mentioned for the senior housing, and then you don't have mostly serious offenses on your criminal background check, then you'd be approved.
To me, 32,000 seems like, I don't know, it seems like a lot of money, even though
It's not, because it adds
Yeah.
up pretty quickly if you calculate Social Security, or even, I mean, I've run into individuals that, if it's a 2-parent household with, $10 an hour jobs, depending on if they get overtime, it can put them over. So there's definitely, it goes quick,
Yes.
because it's gross. It's not necessarily what someone's receiving in their net pay, which is a big factor in, you still don't feel like you have enough to afford the rent. So, good questions.
So much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Martha, and thank you all for being here. Remember that November 10th is our next Women's Lunch, and Daisy Sneed will be our speaker, so you'll hear further reminders of that, and there will be sign-ups. But November 10th, mark your calendars.